I was standing there holding a glass of sparkling water when Angela, my daughter, leaned into the microphone at the gala and said loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear, "We're modernizing this company, moving past the old guard who think they still run the show." Her eyes flicked toward me just for a second, and the crowd laughed like I was some outdated relic they could toss aside. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. Not yet. I'd built this company, Harper Design, from a one-room office with a baby on my hip, and now at our 30-year anniversary gala in this glittering Seattle hotel, my own daughter was erasing me in front of 500 guests. Hello, I'm Dorothy Harper, 62 years old. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. The gala was supposed to be a celebration. 30 years of Harper Design, my life's work turning empty spaces into homes, hotels, dreams. I'd poured everything into this company, late nights sketching by hand, pitching clients, while Angela napped in her stroller, building a name that meant something. And tonight I was supposed to be honored. Instead, I was seated at a side table not even near the stage while Angela and her partner Rachel Evans took center stage. My name wasn't on the program. My speech, the one I'd spent weeks preparing, was cut for time. Susan, my assistant for 25 years, had warned me. "They're sidelining you," she'd whispered that morning, her voice low as we stood in my hotel suite. I'd brushed it off. Angela was ambitious, sure, but she was my daughter. I raised her, gave her everything, a top education, a corner office, a stake in the company. I thought she'd at least respect me. But that comment at the podium wasn't a slip. It was deliberate. Rachel, standing next to Angela, smirked as the laughter died down. She wore a sleek black dress that screamed new money, her hair pinned up with a diamond comb. I recognized my mother's one. I'd loaned Angela for her first big client pitch years ago. I hadn't seen it since. Now it was in Rachel's hair, gleaming under the chandeliers like a trophy. I set my glass down, my fingers steady, and caught Susan's eye across the room. She was standing by the dessert table, her face unreadable but tense. I gave her a small nod. We'd been through worse than this. But this time I was done playing nice. The ballroom was buzzing, clinking glasses, murmurs about Angela's bold vision, people fawning over her and Rachel like they were the future. I slipped behind a velvet curtain near the bar where the noise dulled and pulled out my phone. I called Victor Coleman, my lawyer, who picked up on the first ring. "Dorothy?" he said, his voice calm like he'd been expecting this. "Cancel the $10 million expansion fund Angela was set to announce tonight," I said, my tone even like I was ordering coffee. "It's my money, my company, and I'm pulling it." There was a pause then. Victor said, "You sure?" I didn't hesitate. "I've never been surer." He didn't ask why. He never does. "I'll notify the board now," he said, and hung up. I stood there for a moment, the curtain brushing my shoulder, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Clarity. When I walked back to my table, Susan was waiting, her hands folded tightly. "You okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm fine," I said, sitting down. "But they're about to learn what fine costs." She didn't smile, just poured me another glass of sparkling water. The gala kept going, waiters weaving through tables, the jazz band playing some upbeat cover, people laughing like nothing had happened. But I saw the looks. A few older guests, ones who'd known me since the early days, glanced my way, their faces tight with discomfort. Dorothy Mitchell, a family friend who'd once hosted my first company launch party, caught my eye from across the room. She raised her glass slightly like she knew something was coming. Then Angela took the stage again for the toast. She stood there, all confidence, her red dress catching the light, and started talking about the future of Harper Design. "I want to thank everyone here," she said, her smile wide. "This company is about innovation, about moving forward. And to my mother, Dorothy Harper, who laid the foundation years ago." She paused and the room waited for her to say more. But she didn't. She just moved on talking about her and Rachel's plans, their new era. My name hung in the air, discarded. The applause was polite, but I could feel the shift. People were watching me now, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give them one. I sipped my water and kept my eyes on Angela, who wouldn't meet my gaze. Susan leaned over. "She didn't even mention your award," she said, her voice low. I nodded. They'd promised me a Lifetime Achievement Award tonight, a moment to recognize my 30 years. But the program skipped it. No award, no speech, just Angela's jab about the old guard. I wasn't surprised anymore. I'd seen the signs for months, Angela and Rachel rebranding my designs as their own, leaving me out of board meetings, even changing the company logo without asking me. But tonight they'd gone too far. I stood up, smoothing my dress, and walked toward the back of the ballroom. Dorothy Mitchell caught up with me near the exit, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "That was a disgrace," she said, her voice sharp. "I've known you since you were sketching on napkins, Dorothy. They don't get to rewrite your story." I smiled just a little. "They won't," I said. "Not after tonight." She studied me, then nodded. "Give 'em hell," she said, and walked back to her table. I found a quiet corner near the hotel lobby and called Victor again. "What's the status?" I asked. "Board's been notified," he said. "The fund's frozen. Angela's team will get the update by morning." "Anything else?" I thought for a second. "Start drafting a change to the operating trust," I said. "I want Angela's discretionary power cut. She doesn't get to sign off on anything. Not a contract, not a catering bill without my approval." Victor didn't miss a beat. "I'll have it ready by tomorrow," he said. I hung up and felt the weight of the night settle. This wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, about the legacy I'd built, and the daughter who thought she could erase it. Back in the ballroom, the energy had shifted. People were whispering now, glancing at Angela and Rachel, who were still working the room oblivious. I sat back down and Susan slid a note across the table. "Rachel's assistant just asked why the expansion announcement was pulled," it read. I looked at her. "They're starting to notice," I said. She nodded. "Good. Let them sweat." The rest of the night was a blur of small talk and fake smiles. Angela didn't approach me, but I caught her looking my way once, her face tight, like she sensed something was off. Rachel was worse. She laughed too loudly, tossing her hair, still wearing my mother's comb like it was hers. I didn't confront them. I didn't need to. The wheels were already turning. By the time dessert was served, my phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "Trust amendment drafted. Expansion fund officially voided. Awaiting your final sign-off?" I typed back, "Do it." As the gala wound down, I stood by the hotel's grand staircase watching the guests leave. Dorothy Mitchell came by again, her purse tucked under her arm. I heard whispers, she said, her eyes gleaming. Something about a funding hiccup. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I shrugged. "Just cleaning up some loose ends," I said. She laughed, a low, knowing sound. "You always were sharper than they gave you credit for," she said, and left. Susan walked me to my suite upstairs. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Angela's not going to take it quietly." I looked at her, the woman who'd been by my side through every crisis, every triumph. "She made her choice," I said. "Now she lives with it." Susan nodded, then handed me a folder. "The guest list," she said. I marked the ones who noticed Angela's comment, and the ones who didn't. I took it, scanning the names. Some were old allies, others new players. They'd all hear about this soon enough. That night, alone in my suite, I opened the folder and read through the list. Angela thought she could push me out, that I'd just fade away like some forgotten founder. She didn't know me. Not really. I'd built Harper Design from nothing, and I wasn't about to let her or Rachel tear it down. The gala was just the beginning. By morning, they'd feel the ground shift under them, and I'd be ready for whatever came next. I was in my hotel suite going through a stack of old company contracts when Susan burst through the door, her face tight with urgency. "Angela just called an emergency board meeting," she said, handing me her phone. "She's freaking out about the $10 million fund being pulled." I set the contracts down and took the phone. There was a text from one of our board members, Angela's, claiming it's a clerical error. Wants to push the expansion announcement tomorrow. I handed the phone back to Susan. "Let her try," I said. "She's got no leverage now. Last night I'd frozen that fund, my fund, the one Angela thought she could parade as her big win at the gala. She and Rachel had spent months hyping it up to investors, acting like they were the ones making Harper Design a global name. But they forgot one thing. I built this company and I still held the keys." Susan sat down across from me, pulling out a notepad. "I checked with the finance team," she said. "Angela's been trying to access the discretionary account all morning. She doesn't know it's locked." I nodded, flipping through the contracts again. These were old agreements, ones I'd signed back when Harper Design was just me and a drafting table. Angela had no idea how deep the roots of this company went or how many safeguards I'd put in place. "Keep an eye on her," I said. "I want to know every move she makes." Susan scribbled a note and left to make some calls. I leaned back, the weight of the night before still lingering. Angela's jab at the gala, calling me the old guard, wasn't just a personal slight. It was a signal. She and Rachel were trying to push me out to rebrand my legacy as their own. But they'd miscalculated. I wasn't some figurehead they could sideline. My phone buzzed. It was Victor, my lawyer. "The trust amendment's filed," he said. "Angela's discretionary power is gone. She can't sign off on anything without your approval. Board's been notified." I felt a small spark of satisfaction. "Good," I said. "What's she saying?" Victor paused. "She's spinning it as a misunderstanding, but the board's rattled. They're asking questions." I smiled just a little. "Let them," I said. "And Victor start pulling records on any transactions Angela's initiated in the last 6 months? I want to know what she's been up to." He didn't hesitate. "On it," he said, and hung up. I set the phone down and went back to the contracts. If Angela thought she could outmaneuver me, she was about to learn how wrong she was. A few hours later, Susan came back with a folder. "You need to see this," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside was a printout of emails between Angela and Rachel, forwarded by one of our IT guys who'd been loyal to me since the early days. The emails were blunt. "We need to lock in the expansion fund before Dorothy catches on," Rachel had written. "She's too distracted by the gala to notice." Angela's reply was worse. "Once we announce it, she'll have to back us. She won't risk looking petty in front of the board." I read the emails twice, my jaw tight. They weren't just sidelining me. They were planning to use my own money to cement their control. I looked at Susan. "They thought I wouldn't notice," I said. She nodded. "They're still trying to push the announcement. Angela's meeting with investors right now." I stood up, grabbing my purse. "Get me into that meeting," I said. Susan didn't blink. "Already arranged," she said, handing me a key card for the hotel's executive suite. "It's starting in 20 minutes. We took the elevator down, the hum of it the only sound. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Angela and Rachel had crossed a line, and I was done letting them think they could walk all over me. When we got to the suite, Susan stayed by the door, giving me a nod. I walked in and the room went quiet. Angela was at the head of the table, mid-sentence, with Rachel next to her, and a handful of investors listening. They all turned to look at me. "Dorothy, Angela," said her voice, tight but polite. "I didn't know you were joining us." I didn't smile. "I didn't know you were holding meetings without me," I said, taking a seat. The investors shifted uncomfortably. Rachel jumped in, her tone smooth. "We're just finalizing the expansion details," she said. "Nothing major." I leaned forward, looking straight at Angela. "Then why am I hearing the $10 million fund is still being pitched?" I asked. "That fund's been canceled." The room froze. One investor, a guy in a gray suit, cleared his throat. "Canceled," he said. "We were told it was secured." Angela's face went pale, but she recovered fast. "There's been a mix-up," she said. "We're sorting it out." I didn't let her finish. "There's no mix-up," I said. "I pulled the fund. It's my money, my decision. If you want to talk expansion, you talk to me first." The investors started murmuring, glancing at Angela and Rachel, who were both trying to keep their composure. Rachel forced a smile. "Let's not bore everyone with internal details," she said. "We'll handle this later." But I wasn't done. "You don't handle anything without my approval," I said. "Not anymore." I stood up, nodding to the investors. "Thank you for your time," I said, and walked out. Susan was waiting outside, her eyes sharp. "How'd it go?" she asked. "They're scrambling," I said. "And they should be." Back in my suite, I called Victor again. "I want the board to know Angela's been making unauthorized moves," I said. "Send them the emails Susan found. And start transferring half the discretionary account to the Harper Initiative, my women's education fund. $5 million effective immediately." Victor didn't flinch. "I'll get it done," he said. I hung up and sat down, the folder of emails still open in front of me. Angela and Rachel weren't just ambitious. They were reckless, thinking they could use my company as their personal piggy bank. But I'd built Harper Design on trust and hard work, and I wasn't about to let them tear it apart. Susan came back later with more news. "Angela's furious," she said. "She called Rachel after the meeting, and I overheard them in the lobby. They're planning to spin this to the board, say you're acting irrationally." I nodded. I'd expected this. Angela was always good at playing the victim when things didn't go her way. "Let them try," I said. "They've got no proof?" Susan hesitated, then pulled out another document. "There's something else," she said. "I had the finance team check the discretionary account. Angela tried to transfer $200,000 to a private account last week. It didn't go through because you'd already locked it, but she used your name to authorize it." I stared at the document, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just disrespect. This was theft. I picked up the phone and called Victor. "I need an audit," I said. "Every transaction Angela's touched in the last year. And I want that private account traced now." Victor's voice was steady. "I'll have a team on it by tonight," he said. I hung up and looked at Susan. "She's not just pushing me out," I said. "She's trying to take everything." Susan nodded, her face grim. "What's next?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "We go public," I said. "I want the board to know exactly what she's been doing. And I want it on record." By evening, Victor had sent a memo to the board outlining Angela's unauthorized transfer attempt and attaching the emails. I didn't stop there. I called Dorothy Mitchell, who'd been at the gala and seen Angela's stunt. "I need a favor," I said. "Spread the word. Let people know Angela's been playing fast and loose with company funds." Dorothy didn't miss a beat. "Consider it done," she said. "I've got a lunch tomorrow with some old clients. They'll eat this up." I thanked her and hung up. The whispers were already starting, and I knew how fast they'd spread. Seattle's business world was small, and people loved a scandal. The next move came from Angela. She showed up at my suite unannounced, her face flushed with anger. Susan let her in, but stayed by the door watching. "What are you doing?" Angela demanded, her voice sharp. "You're tanking everything we've worked for." I looked at her calm. "You mean everything I've worked for?" I said. "You don't get to use my name to steal from me." She froze, then tried to pivot. "It was a misunderstanding," she said. "I was trying to secure the expansion. I didn't buy it." "You were trying to secure your own future," I said. "And you thought I wouldn't notice." She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "Get out," I said. "We're done here." She stood there for a second, then turned and left, slamming the door behind her. Susan looked at me. "She's not going to stop," she said. I nodded. "I know," I said. "That's why we're not stopping either." I picked up the phone and called Victor again. "I want Angela's name off the succession plan," I said. "She's not inheriting control of this company. Not now, not ever." Victor paused, then said, "That's a big move, Dorothy." "You sure?" I didn't waver. "I'm sure," I said. "And I want it filed before the board meeting tomorrow?" He didn't argue. "I'll make it happen," he said. The board meeting was set for the next day, and I knew Angela and Rachel would come prepared. They'd try to spin the narrative, paint me as erratic or out of touch. But I had the emails, the audit, and 30 years of reputation on my side. I wasn't just fighting for control of Harper Design. I was fighting for the truth, for the legacy I'd built with my own hands. Angela thought she could erase me, but she was about to learn that I wasn't going anywhere. By the time the meeting started, the board would know exactly who they were dealing with, and Angela and Rachel would be out of moves. I was in Victor's office going over the audit reports when Susan called with news that made my stomach twist. "Angela's been talking to the board," she said, her voice low and urgent. "She's saying you're losing your grip, making erratic decisions. Rachel's backing her up, and they've got a couple of investors on their side." I set the report down and leaned back in the chair. The memo I'd sent to the board exposing Angela's attempt to transfer $200,000 without my approval had shaken things up, but not the way I'd hoped. Instead of turning on Angela, some of them were listening to her spin, questioning my judgment. I'd built Harper Design from nothing, turned it into a name people trusted, and now my own daughter was trying to paint me as unstable to save her own skin. "What's the board saying?" I asked. Susan paused. "They're split. Some want a meeting to clear things up. Others are waiting to see who comes out on top." I nodded. "Keep me posted," I said, and hung up. Angela and Rachel weren't just fighting back. They were playing dirty. Victor looked up from his desk, where he was sorting through a stack of transaction records. "She's desperate," he said. "This kind of move only works if she can sway the majority." I picked up one of the reports, scanning the numbers. Angela had been busy, small transfers here and there. Nothing big enough to raise flags, but enough to add up. "She's been siphoning funds for months," I said. "And she thought I wouldn't notice." Victor nodded. "We've traced most of it to a shell account tied to Rachel's name. $250,000 so far." I set the report down. "File it with the board," I said. "And make sure they know it's not just Angela. Rachel's in this up to her neck." Victor didn't blink. "I'll have it sent out within the hour," he said. Back at the hotel, Susan was waiting in my suite with a new stack of documents. "You're not going to believe this," she said, handing me a contract. It was a licensing deal for one of my old designs signed with my name, but I hadn't touched it. The signature was close, too close, but the loops on the D were wrong. "Angela forged this," I said, my voice steady but cold. Susan nodded. "She pushed it through last month, got $100,000 up front. The client thought you approved it." I looked at her. "They're not just stealing," I said. "They're rewriting my work as theirs." Susan's face was grim. "There's more," she said. "I found an email from Rachel to a lawyer asking about guardianship clauses. They're trying to set you up, make it look like you're not fit to run the company." I stood up pacing to the window, not because I was rattled, but because I needed to move. Angela wasn't just after control. She was trying to erase me completely to lock me out of my own legacy. I turned to Susan. "Get me that lawyer's name," I said. "And pull every contract Angela's touched in the last year." She nodded and left to make the calls. I sat down and opened my laptop, pulling up the company's financial records. If Angela thought she could outsmart me, she was about to learn how deep my roots went. I'd spent 30 years building safeguards, keeping records, making sure no one could pull the rug out from under me. And now those records were my weapon. Dorothy Mitchell called while I was still digging through the files. "You've got people talking," she said, her voice sharp with amusement. "I had lunch with some old clients today, and they're buzzing about Angela's little stunt with the funds. But you need to watch your back. Rachel's been cozying up to one of the board members, feeding him stories about you." I leaned back, processing. "Which one?" I asked. "Carlton Hayes," she said. "He's always been a sucker for a pretty face." I thanked her and hung up. Carlton was a problem, but not a big one. He'd been on the board for years, loyal to me until someone dangled a better deal. I made a note to deal with him later. Susan came back with a folder and a name. "The lawyer's David Pratt," she said. "He specializes in corporate takeovers and guardianship cases. Rachel's been meeting with him for weeks." I took the folder, flipping through it. There were emails, meeting logs, even a draft of a petition claiming I was unfit to manage Harper Design due to recent erratic behavior. It was all there, laid out like a playbook. Angela and Rachel weren't just playing for control. They were trying to strip me of everything: my company, my reputation, my freedom. I looked at Susan. "This ends now," I said. "Call Victor. I want a board meeting tomorrow, and I want Pratt's name on the agenda." While Susan made the call, I went through my personal files looking for something I hadn't touched in years. It was a locked box in my safe, one I'd kept since Angela was a baby. Inside were adoption papers signed when she was 6 months old. I'd never told her she was adopted. I'd raised her as my own, given her my name, my love, my company. But now those papers were a weapon. If Angela wanted to play dirty, I'd play dirtier. I called Victor and told him to prepare a statement for the board. "Include the adoption," I said. "I want it on record." He paused, then said, "That's a nuclear option, Dorothy." "You sure?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm sure," I said. "She's not my blood, and she's not my heir. They need to know." The board meeting was set for the afternoon, and I spent the morning preparing with Victor and Susan. We had the forged contract, the shell account records, the emails to Pratt, everything laid out like evidence in a trial. I wasn't just fighting for control anymore. I was fighting for the truth. When I walked into the boardroom, the air was thick with tension. Angela was there, sitting next to Rachel, both of them dressed like they were going to a photo shoot. Carlton Hayes was on Angela's other side, avoiding my gaze. The other board members looked uneasy, their eyes darting between us. Victor started the meeting, laying out the audit findings. "We've uncovered unauthorized transactions totaling $350,000, he said, passing out copies of the records. "Initiated by Angela Larson with Rachel Evans' involvement." The room murmured, and Angela jumped in. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, her voice smooth. "I was acting in the company's best interest. Dorothy's been under stress, and we were trying to keep things moving." Rachel nodded, her smile tight. "We're just protecting the company's future," she said. I didn't let them finish. "Protecting," I said, standing up. "You forged my signature on a contract. You tried to transfer funds to a private account. You met with a lawyer to declare me unfit. That's not protection. That's theft." The board went silent. Carlton shifted in his seat, but no one spoke. I nodded to Victor, who handed out another document. There's something else you need to know, I said. Angela Larson is not my biological daughter. She was adopted at 6 months old. She has no legal claim to Harper Design's succession unless I allow it. And I'm not allowing it. Angela's face froze, her eyes wide. Rachel reached for her arm, but Angela pulled away. What she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't look at her. I looked at the board. She's been acting like she owns this company, I said. But she doesn't. I do. And I'm done letting her pretend otherwise. The room erupted in whispers. Angela stood up, her chair scraping the floor. You can't do this, she said, her voice shaking. You raised me. You gave me this company. I met her gaze. I gave you a chance, I said. You threw it away. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Rachel tried to jump in. This is outrageous, she said. You're trying to smear us. But the board wasn't listening to her. They were reading the documents, flipping through the evidence. Victor took over, outlining the next steps. Effective immediately, he said, Angela Larson is removed from all decision-making roles. Dorothy Harper is redirecting $5 million from the company's discretionary fund to the Harper Initiative for Women's Education. Angela stormed out, Rachel trailing behind her. The board didn't stop them. After the meeting, Susan caught up with me in the hallway. That was brutal, she said, her voice low. You okay? I nodded. I did what I had to, I said. But they're not done yet. She handed me a note from Dorothy Mitchell, who'd been watching from the sidelines. Heard about the meeting, it read. Rachel's already calling her contacts, trying to spin this. Watch your back. I folded the note and slipped it into my purse. Angela and Rachel were down, but they weren't out. They'd come back with something bigger, something meaner, and I'd be ready. I was in my office at Harper Design, sorting through a stack of board resolutions when Susan rushed in with a tablet in her hand. Angela just filed a lawsuit, she said, her voice sharp but steady, sliding the tablet across my desk. The headline on the screen was blunt. Harper Design Air sues founder Dorothy Harper over unlawful trust changes. Angela was claiming I'd manipulated the company's trust to cut her out, accusing me of fraud and mismanagement. Rachel's name was all over it, too, quoted as a concerned partner who feared for the company's future. I'd just dropped the bombshell at the board meeting that Angela was adopted, stripping her of any claim to Harper Design, and now she was hitting back, trying to drag my name through the mud. I handed the tablet back to Susan. They're desperate, I said. This is all they've got left. But I knew a lawsuit wasn't just a tantrum. It was a public attack designed to make the board and our clients question me. Susan sat down, pulling out a notepad. I checked with our PR team, she said. Angela's people leaked the story to 3 major outlets. They're spinning it like you're pushing her out for personal reasons. I nodded, flipping through the resolutions. I'd spent 30 years building Harper Design, turning it into a name that stood for trust and quality. Angela thought she could tear that down with a press release, but she didn't know how many cards I still held. Call Victor, I said. I want a response drafted, and I want every piece of evidence we've got ready to go public. Susan didn't hesitate, grabbing her phone and stepping out to make the call. I leaned back, the weight of the board meeting still heavy. Angela's face when I'd revealed she was adopted, shock. Then rage kept flashing in my mind, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about feelings. It was about protecting what I'd built. Victor called back within the hour, his voice calm but focused. The lawsuit's weak, he said. They've got no hard evidence, just accusations. But it's getting traction online. We need to hit back fast. I didn't miss a beat. Send the board the full audit, I said. The forged contract, the shell account, the emails to that lawyer about guardianship, and leak it to the press. I want the truth out there before Angela's story takes hold. Victor paused, then said, That'll bury them, Dorothy. You sure I didn't waver? I'm sure, I said. And start transferring the rest of the discretionary fund to the Harper Initiative. $7 million effective immediately. He didn't argue. I'll have it done by tonight, he said, and hung up. I set the phone down and went back to the resolutions. Angela and Rachel were fighting for scraps now, but I wasn't just defending my company. I was rewriting its future. Susan came back with a new folder, her face grim. You need to see this, she said, handing me a transcript of a recorded call between Rachel and a reporter. Susan had gotten it from one of our IT guys who'd been monitoring their communications. The transcript was damning. Dorothy's been erratic for years, Rachel had said. She's hoarding control, pushing out anyone who challenges her. Angela's just trying to save the company. I read it twice, my jaw tight. They weren't just lying, they were building a whole narrative to make me the villain. I looked at Susan. This goes to Victor, I said. And tell him to include it in the press leak. She nodded and left to handle it. I stood up, grabbing my purse. I wasn't going to sit here while Angela and Rachel tried to rewrite my story. It was time to take this fight to them. I called Dorothy Mitchell, who'd been keeping tabs on the gossip since the gala. I need you to do something, I said. Get the word out to your network. Tell them Angela's lawsuit is a sham, and we've got proof she's been stealing from the company. Dorothy's voice was sharp with excitement. Oh, I've been waiting for this, she said. I'm hosting a dinner tonight with some big names. They'll spread it faster than wildfire. I thanked her and hung up. The whispers were already out there, but now they'd have teeth. Seattle's business world thrived on reputation, and I was about to make sure Angela and Rachel's were in tatters. Angela showed up at my office unannounced, her face flushed with anger. Susan let her in but stayed close, her eyes sharp. How could you do this? Angela demanded, her voice shaking. You told the world I'm not your daughter, like I mean nothing to you. I looked at her, calm but firm. You meant something, I said. Until you tried to steal my company and call me unfit? You made your choice. She took a step closer, her hands clenched. I was trying to protect our legacy, she said. You're the one tearing it apart. I didn't flinch. You don't get to talk about legacy, I said. You forged my name, siphoned funds, and sued me. That's not family. That's greed. She froze, her eyes glistening, but I didn't soften. Get out, I said. We're done. She stood there for a second, then turned and left, the door clicking shut behind her. Susan looked at me. That was rough, she said, her voice low. I nodded. It had to be, I said. She's not stopping, and neither are we. I picked up the phone and called Victor. What's the status on the press leak? I asked. It's out, he said. 2 outlets just published stories with the audit details and Rachel's transcript. The lawsuit's losing steam already. I felt a spark of satisfaction. Good, I said. And the $7 million transfer. He didn't miss a beat. Filed an hour ago, he said. The Harper Initiative's fully funded now. I hung up and sat down, the folder of evidence still open in front of me. Angela and Rachel had tried to take everything, but I was turning their own weapons against them. The backlash hit fast. By evening, social media was buzzing with posts about Angela's forged contract and Rachel's lies to the press. Clients started calling, pulling out of deals Angela had brokered. One of our biggest investors sent an email to the board demanding Angela's removal from all company roles. Susan handed me a printout of the email, her face grim but satisfied. They're done, she said. The board's meeting tomorrow to vote on it. I nodded, scanning the email. The tide was turning, but I knew Angela wouldn't go quietly. She'd try one last move, something desperate. And I had to be ready. Dorothy Mitchell called later, her voice brimming with glee. You should have seen their faces at dinner, she said. I dropped the news about the audit, and half the table was on their phones texting their contacts. Angela's name is mud now. I smiled just a little. Keep it going, I said. I want everyone to know the truth. She laughed. Oh, they will, she said. You've got more allies than you think. I thanked her and hung up. The support was nice, but I didn't need it. I'd built Harper Design on my own, and I'd protect it the same way. Victor sent a text with a link to a new article, Harper Design founder fights back against fraud allegations. It laid out everything: the forged contract, the shell account, Rachel's call to the reporter. My name was clear, and Angela and Rachel were painted as the schemers. They were. But then Susan came in with something else. Angela's planning a press conference, she said, handing me a leaked schedule. She's going to double down. Say you've been manipulating her for years. I looked at the schedule, my mind racing. A press conference was a bold move, but it was also a mistake. Angela was exposing herself, giving me an opening. I called Victor. I want to be at that press conference, I said. And I want a statement ready with every piece of evidence we've got. He didn't hesitate. I'll set it up, he said. You're going to end this, aren't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When I walked into the press conference, the room was packed, reporters, cameras, even a few board members watching from the sidelines. Angela was at the podium mid-sentence when she saw me. Her voice faltered, but she kept going, accusing me of betraying her trust, of using her adoption to humiliate her. Rachel stood behind her, nodding like a loyal sidekick. I stepped forward, holding a folder. I'm Dorothy Harper, I said, my voice clear. And I'm here to set the record straight. I handed the folder to a reporter in the front row. Inside you'll find proof of Angela Larson's fraud, forged contracts, stolen funds, and lies to this board and our clients. She's not a victim. She's a thief. The room erupted, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Angela tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I've transferred $7 million to the Harper Initiative, a fund for women's education, I said. That's my legacy. Not lawsuits. Not lies. I turned to Angela. You're done, I said, and walked out. Susan was waiting outside, her face lit up. That was a slaughter, she said. I nodded. It's not over yet, I said. Back at my office, Victor called with an update. The board voted, he said. Angela's out. Rachel, too. And the lawsuit's been dismissed. I leaned back, the weight lifting just a little. But then Susan handed me a note from Angela, slipped under my door. Please, it read. I just want to talk. No cameras, no board. Just us. I stared at the note, knowing it was a trap, but also knowing I'd hear her out. Not because I owed her, but because I needed to see what she'd do next. I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop near my house, waiting for Angela, when Susan texted me with an update that sealed everything. Rachel's gone, she wrote. She's cut ties with Angela, pulled out of all Harper Design deals, and left town. I set the phone down, not surprised. Rachel was always the type to jump ship when the water got rough. And after the press conference where I laid out their fraud, forged contracts, stolen funds, lies about my competence, she had no ground left to stand on. Angela's note slipped under my office door after the board kicked her out. Had begged for this meeting. No cameras, no board, just us. I agreed, not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted to see her face when she realized there was no way back. I'd built Harper Design from a single sketch into a 30-year legacy, and Angela thought she could steal it. She was wrong, and this was the end of her story and mine. Angela walked in, her face pale, her usual polish gone. She wore a plain sweater, no makeup, like she was trying to look small. She sat across from me, her hands folded tight. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice low, almost broken. I didn't respond. just looked at her waiting. She took a breath. "I messed up," she said. "I let Rachel push me, let ambition take over. I didn't mean to hurt you." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You forged my signature," I said. "You stole hundreds of thousands of dollars, sued me, called me unfit. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Her eyes glistened, but I didn't soften. "You were my daughter," I said. "I gave you everything, my name, my company, my trust. And you threw it away." She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I just wanted to be like you," she said. I shook my head. "You wanted to replace me," I said. "There's a difference." She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "This isn't a negotiation," I said. "You're out of Harper Design. The board's done with you. The clients are gone, and I'm not changing my mind." Angela's face crumpled, but she didn't fight back. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice shaking. I looked at her, the girl I'd raised, the one I'd adopted at 6 months old, thinking she'd carry my legacy. "You start over," I said. "Without my name." She sat there silent, then stood and left, the door chime ringing behind her. I didn't watch her go. I'd said what I needed to, and I was done. Susan called as I left the coffee shop, her voice brisk. "The board's asking for a final statement," she said. "They want to know your plans for Harper Design." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I'll have something ready," I said. "And Susan, get me the latest numbers on the Harper initiative." I hung up and drove to Victor's office, where he was waiting with a stack of legal documents. "The $7 million transfer to the Harper initiative is complete," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "The fund's already supporting 3 new education programs for women in design." I flipped through the folder, seeing the names of the first recipients, young women from places I'd never been, building futures I'd never see. "Good," I said. "Now let's finish this." Victor leaned back, his eyes sharp. "You're really doing it, aren't you?" he said. "Walking away from Harper Design." I nodded. "It's time," I said. "The company's strong, but it doesn't need me anymore. The initiative does." I'd spent 30 years building Harper Design, fighting for every contract, every client, every inch of respect. But Angela's betrayal, her forged contracts, her lawsuit, her lies, showed me something. Legacy isn't a name on a building. It's what you leave behind for others to grow. I looked at Victor. "Draft a statement," I said. "I'm stepping down effective immediately. And I'm transferring $10 million, the last of my personal stake, to the Harper initiative." He didn't blink. "I'll have it ready by tonight," he said. Susan met me at my house later, carrying a box of old files. "I pulled these from the archives," she said, setting it down. "Thought you might want them." Inside were my first sketches, contracts I'd signed when Harper Design was just a dream. Photos of me and Angela when she was little, before she decided my name was a stepping stone. I didn't linger on them. "Box it up," I said. "It's history, not my future." Susan nodded, then handed me a note from Dorothy Mitchell. "The whole town's talking," it read. "Angela's name is done, and yours is stronger than ever. Dinner soon," I smiled, tucking the note away. Dorothy had been there from the start, spreading the truth when Angela tried to bury me. She'd earned that dinner. The board statement went out, and I watched the fallout from my living room, Susan by my side with a tablet. "Dorothy Harper steps down, donates $10 million to women's education," the headline read. The article was clean, factual, no fluff. It mentioned Angela's fraud, Rachel's exit, and my decision to leave Harper Design to focus on the Harper initiative. Clients sent emails, some shocked, others supportive. A few board members called asking me to reconsider, but I didn't answer. I'd made my choice. Susan scrolled through social media, reading comments. "People are calling you a legend," she said, her voice warm. "They're saying you took down a fraud and built something better." I shrugged. I just told the truth, I said. That's all. Victor called with a final update. The board's appointed a new CEO, he said. Someone outside the family like you wanted. And Angela's been served a cease and desist for using the Harper name in any future ventures. I nodded, satisfied. What's she doing now? I asked. Victor paused. She's gone quiet, he said. No press, no posts, nothing. Rachel's the same. I hung up, the silence settling around me. Angela and Rachel had tried to take everything, my company, my reputation, my legacy. But they'd lost, and I'd walked away on my terms. Dorothy Mitchell stopped by bringing a bottle of wine and a grin. You did it, she said, pouring us each a glass. You burned their house down without breaking a sweat. I took a sip, the wine sharp and clean. I didn't burn anything, I said. I just cleared the way for something new. She laughed, raising her glass. To new beginnings, she said. I clinked my glass against hers. To the truth, I said. We drank, and for the first time in months I felt light, like the weight of 30 years had finally lifted. Susan and I finalized the Harper Initiative's first major project, a scholarship program for women in design, funded by the $10 million transfer. I didn't need to run it myself. I'd picked a team, people I trusted, to carry it forward. My name was on it, but the work was theirs now. I called a press conference, not for drama, but to make it official. The room was smaller than the last one, just a few reporters, no board members, no Angela. I stood at the podium, my voice clear. I'm Dorothy Harper, I said. I built Harper Design, and now I'm building something else. The Harper Initiative is my legacy, supporting women who'll create their own futures. That's what matters. The reporters asked questions, but I kept it short. I didn't need their approval. I'd done what I set out to do. Angela sent one last letter, hand-delivered to my house. Susan brought it in, her face neutral. You want to read it? She asked. I took it, opening the envelope. I'm sorry, it read. I lost myself and I lost you. I hope you find peace. I folded it and handed it back to Susan. File it, I said. I don't need apologies. She nodded and left to store it with the rest of the records. Angela's words didn't change anything. She'd made her choices and I'd made mine. Peace wasn't something she could give me. I'd found it on my own. Victor and I met one last time to close out the legal side. Everything's locked down, he said, handing me a final document. The initiative's untouchable and Harper Design's in good hands. I signed it, my name steady on the page. You did more than save the company, he said, his voice soft. You redefined it. I looked at him, the man who'd been by my side through every fight. I just did what was right, I said. He smiled just a little. That's why you won, he said. I walked away from Harper Design, but I didn't look back. The company was strong, its new leaders capable, its name still tied to mine, but no longer my burden. The Harper Initiative was my focus now, a legacy that wasn't about buildings or boardrooms, but about people, about futures I'd never see but knew I'd shaped. Angela and Rachel were gone, their names fading from Seattle's business world, their lies buried under the truth. I'd fought for my name, my work, my life, and I'd won. Not with anger, but with clarity. And that was enough.